I'm always fascinated with you guys, you scientists, the medicine folk that run into business, and it's like on one end, scientist,
Yeah.
business owner, kind of complete opposites. But
They really are. I mean, I think it's a totally different part of your brain
yeah,
that you have to use, and down to the employee management, to the client management, and then running the nuts and bolts of your business.
so take me back to high school. Okay, did you know you wanted to go into medicine back then?
Man, high school, first of all, was a blur. So it tells you a lot. No, I was not a driven teenager in terms of having a successful future driven. I was more impulse driven to just, have a good time. So, that was me. But then in college, where I barely got into college, and then getting in, I was surrounded by people that were driven, and that was a huge blessing to me. So in high school, my circle was very different than when I started college. Immediately, I was around different people, and I think that really was my roommate for sure, Joey. He's out there, he's a pediatric cardiologist, and he taught me how to study, how to just the basics.
Yeah.
So it's really in college, and then in college, I didn't know. My mom was a dentist. I grew up around it. I worked in her office, in the back end and in the front. And so I knew a little bit of dentistry, and my parents, knowing the kind of person I was, they knew that if they would try to, pressure me too much, it wouldn't work. So they kind of nudged me here and there, but let me explore. And I really kind of discovered that I liked school, I liked studying, I liked excelling. I was very competitive by nature. So I was like, this is good. I want to do this, So I want to get into healthcare. And so in college, I went to UC Riverside, kind of a smaller UC. It's bigger now. But at that time, when you get into college and you get into healthcare, there's these clubs and societies and, subgroups of people talking about circles. So there's even smaller circles of people that want to go to medical school or dental school or vet school. There was no dental society. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start a dental society. There's no dental society, there's no dental club, nothing. And so I just found out how to do it. I went to this old office, and this old lady was like, all right, here's a form, fill it out. And I started the club, and I was like, she's like, what's going to be called? And I didn't even know. I didn't even think about that. And right there in front of her desk, I was like, Future Dentist Club. That club's still there today.
Wow.
It's still there. They have a Facebook group. I kind of low-key stalk them, see what they're doing. But yeah, I started it. Like, I remember in chemistry class, these are giant auditoriums, like 400 people, And I would get up, I would tell the professor, hey, I want to announce my club. And he would just give me this look like, what? Like, who are you? And then he's like, okay, go for it, kid. So I'd get up and write, and everybody would be hushed silent. Who's this kid standing up? And I'd write on the chalkboard, if you're interested in a dental club, we're starting one. Here's the info, and here's my email. And no one had ever done that. And so it started, and I got these groups of people, and we would meet and talk about how to get into dental school. What should you do for your resume? What exam do you take? And so we formed this circle of friends, really. We still keep in touch, a lot of us. That was college, and I got into dental school, UCLA, which is a good school, and so getting into UCLA, I was even surrounded by even tighter, crazier group of people. I mean, these were the gunners of gunners, very unlike me, so I had a very different background. I don't want to say I was in the party scene, but I was not. Academics wasn't my focus. Even in college, I still partied.
Had a good time.
Yeah. So UCLA was a real humbling experience because I was kind of the big fish at UC Riverside. I started my own club. I was the president. I handed it off. It still was going. And I was just like this big shot. And then into UCLA, I was a guppy, man. There was sharks everywhere. And these were the smartest, most talented people I've ever met. And it was amazing. Like, I really made a lot of good friends, still keep in touch with them today.
Yeah.
And then graduated dental school, and I was thrown out to try to be a dentist. My mom was a dentist, so I worked with her for a year. Wasn't really feeling it because my dad was in there as well. And that's a whole nother.
That's a whole show.
Yeah.
I mean, so just a quick trailer of that show. Iraqi first generation immigrant, had an engineering background back home, came to America, no engineering, started doing check cashing businesses, and then decided, I'm going to try to manage my wife's dental office. So he's managing a dental office, zero healthcare experience, thick accent, but he did it. He made it, and it was successful. And him and my mom, God bless them, they got through it. And so I'm thrown in the middle of it, and it was crazy. So I did some changes, did some positive things, but I realized this is not what I want to do. Like dentistry, general dentistry is not what I want. I was single. I had the opportunity to go to where I want, travel. So I applied to specialty, which is where you focus even more. And I really liked surgery. I really liked medicine. And so I got into an oral surgery program, here in Houston. And that's what brought me to Texas.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd be in Texas, bro.
Yeah.
But it's been amazing. I met my wife, when I was in medical school. So for oral surgery, so what I do, I'm an oral surgeon. So we have our feet in both worlds, medicine and dentistry, and for better, for worse, So I went to dental school and I went to medical school, and then I did general surgery, anesthesia, and then oral surgery. It was a 6-year program after 4 years of dental school. So it was a long road. And during that residency, 6 years in Houston, the Med Center, again, surrounded by incredible people, and they really inspired me, up from the professors who would grind you down and build you back up, to your co-residents who were in the trenches with you, and the other specialties that you work with, general surgery, ENT. And it was an amazing experience. Some of the best times of my life, hardest times of my life, and I got out as an oral surgeon, and then they're like, all right, go figure it out, go be an oral surgeon.
Yeah.
And so when you get out of oral surgery, there's like few routes. One, you can join up with a group.
So hold on a second. I want to come back to this.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back. You talked about 10 years of post-college, right? 10 years. So at this point, how old are you?
I mean, I graduated in 2013, so I was 34.
34. Now, most of your friends that maybe graduated Riverside, they started their business, they got 10 years earnings ahead of you already.
Yeah.
And you went to school, probably spent some money, got some debt going on. And before you finished, correct me if I'm wrong, you started a family, right?
Yeah. I mean, Layla and I had our daughter when I was 3 months from finishing.
Yeah. What was that like? Still not figuring, you still don't know what you're going to do full time. Well, you kind of have an idea, but you haven't started yet. And now here you go. You're responsible for this human being. What was that like?
It was stressful. I mean, coming from my background where I was like, hey, I'm going to try this out. Hey, I'm going to do this, and, just kind of on my own, figuring it out and getting through it. Now I have a family depending on me. I have a baby and a wife who needs to stay with the baby and raise this child. And I have to make sure that financially we're okay, and that I'm okay, and that we can get through this, jungle of life. So it was very stressful. I think that's when I really just became an adult, because for the whole time it was just school.
Right.
Studying, it was just like, okay, exam, rotation, this and that. Now it's like, I got to make money, I got to go and pay bills.
Yeah.
And it's just 34 years old is when it started, what I mean? My friends, they graduated college 24. And then 10 years ahead of me, they've been,
So your earning period, I mean, most medical professionals is shrunk, right? So you have less time to make mistakes, or you can't make as many mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
So you start a family, you realize, this is real now.
Yeah.
And I got to start making money, and I got to go and become a practicing oral surgeon. At that point, you were talking about the different paths. What are the options available for somebody in your position at that time? What are the different tracks that they could go to?
So this was 2013, and I think it's changed now. I mean, it's 10 years, So at that time, you can either join a practice, meaning I really akin to it to law, right? You have a law firm that has associates and partners. It's the same model as some of these older practices, So there's a big practice it's called Northwest Oral Surgery, Northwest Houston Oral Surgery, something like that. There's 9 offices, probably 14 surgeons, and they, there's a senior circle group, and then there's a junior partners, and then there's associates, so you join a group like that if they're looking, and you just kind of work your way up and try to get a partner, None of them were looking at that time, and not in Houston. I tried to go back to California. That's where my family was, and that was fruitless because California is a whole nother jungle, very saturated. and we are. I mean, people say California is 10 years ahead of us, and it's true because now I'm seeing things in Houston that I saw in California 10 years ago.
Right.
You know, the salaries being offered in California were a fraction of what you can get in Texas. And you'd have to work probably 6 days a week, maybe even 7, and commute a lot more. So you'd work harder, make less.
And you have another partner in California, a silent partner, the state of California taking state income tax.
Exactly, because the beach is not free.
That's right.
So
That's
the
right.
beach costs money. So, you know, we tried that. I was like, no, that's not going to work. So I stayed in Houston, and I kind of hedged, you know.
Right.
So the other option is you can work for a company, and the companies vary. There's small, medium, and large, you know. The smaller companies are like Texas-based, maybe 4 or 5 offices, and they need a in-house surgeon, you know, and you kind of provide surgical care to these dental offices that kind of feed you, you know, they send to you. So maybe like if you're a PI lawyer and you partner with like 5 chiropractors and they feed you stuff, you know, this is kind of like you're their in-house guy. Which is okay. You don't get exposed to a whole lot because you're kind of just relegated to what these offices are doing, these dentists, and they're usually newer dentists, just like me.
And so you're at that option, so you're limited to being an employee, whereas the former, there's
a path
to shareholder or
like this
partner,
this second option, they had some paths set up, but it really was kind of cloudy and wasn't really, you know, attractive. But it was just get your feet wet, get in there, start making some money. They were ready to go. Day one, had patients ready for me, but I didn't want to do full time with them. I also want to do a little bit of some more private practice. And so I had a good friend who was my chief resident, and he offered me a couple of days a week at his private practice, you know, and his story is he started things from scratch. And so he had his own offices set up and he needed some help. So I had like 3 days a week with this company and 2 days a week with my friend. And that was my 5 days, you know. And starting day one, you know, I was working, driving around, and it was good. I gained a lot of experience. I was by myself, you know, so that's the big thing too, is when you get out of surgery school, you can either be by yourself or be part of a group. And the nice thing about a group, you have mentorship. Right. I mean, you have people down the hall, hey, what do I do with this case? Or what do you do? What do you think about this? You know, but for me, I was by myself. So it was just kind of like figuring it out, really accelerated self-learning, which I think is good. I think for me, it worked better. You know, I think if I was in a group, it might not have made me as driven to find out what kind of surgeon I am. Did that for a couple of years. Time flies. You know, our second kid came along, you know, now we have 2. And I had to figure out, is this what I want to do? Because if I blink, it'll be 5 years, you know? So I was like, what do I do? So I wanted to partner with my friend. I wanted to like, hey, let me get in. You know, I'll put in some equity and I want to have some ownership.
You wanted more than just being paid for your time. You wanted some kind of upside.
Because I was making money for these people, but I didn't own anything, you know, which is fine for some people. But for me, my personality is different. So we explored that, didn't work out, and just one of those things, you know, life throws you chances. And this practice opened up in this city called Memorial, which is like a affluent suburb of Houston. Surgeon had suddenly passed away. His office was just sitting there idle, losing value every day. And his friend was someone I was being referred to in one of my jobs, you know, so he knew me and he's like, hey, Laith, this just opened up. They're looking for somebody. They're struggling. They're desperate. Go check it out. I went, checked it out. Next thing you know, I got it. You know what I mean? It was just like within a week, I was a practice owner. I mean, it was crazy. Yeah. So
I want to ask you a question on that. So here's the opportunity that presents itself. And I'm assuming when 10 years of post-college, not once did you learn about how to buy and sell a business, correct?
No. I mean, I had a minor in business in college, but I mean, you know.
So was this just your gut, your business sense that took in and figure out how to do this?
Well, you know, I had some advice.
Okay.
So there was, when I was exploring the partnership, I was also thinking about starting my own. You know, I was like, all right, if this doesn't work out, I'm going to start my own. I started my own dental club. You know, I had that adventurous mentality. I can do it. I can figure it out. Just jump in. If they can do it, they're not that much smarter than me. You know what I mean? I can probably figure it out. So I'd already kind of employed the service of this consultant group. He advised me and he would tell me, okay, you should start here in this area. I did the demographic study of this part of Houston. You should open up here. And I looked, oh, there's a little space here. Why don't you go and try to buy
So this
space?
is, okay, was this to buy or to start?
To buy
an existing.
Yeah.
So wait, sorry, I just want to make sure. So he was helping you both with acquiring an existing practice, and also if you wanted to start your own?
His business was very niche. He was an oral surgery consultant. He was an oral surgeon.
Sure.
He worked for a financial advisory group, broke off from them, and said, I'm going to focus on this little niche of oral surgeons who want to start their own practice. That's all he did. He would help you set it up from A to Z. The real estate end, the equipment, setting up paperwork, forms, everything. You know what I mean? So that was his thing. And he would market himself to all the programs. So his name was out there. And I was like, all right, let's try it out. He's a very smart guy, knows exactly what he's doing, you know? So I told him, hey, this practice just came up. What do you think about it? He's like, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's been there for 15 years. They're making money. You're going to get a fire sale out of it because they're going to sell no matter what, you know? So I was like, just go for it, you know? And so he from him saying that, I was like, all right, this is probably a good idea, you know, and I had to make the decision, and I, you know, consulted with my wife, and we thought about it, and we prayed on it, whatever, you know, and then we did it. So took over that practice. That practice was not in the best shape. You know, when you take over something for someone that passed away, it's a really strange experience because you really open up the closet and you see everything in their life, you know what I mean? Because there's no one there to guide you. So everything, I just open all the cabinets and drawers and files and everything, and it's amazing what you can find out when someone just leaves. You know, they don't sell it for you as a presented and thing. It's just like, here's the key, go in. You have no idea. It's like opening up a storage bin that you paid for, you know? So it was not in the best shape. And if I would have known how the shape it was, I would have probably offered them, you know, a fraction.
I think, you know, any entrepreneur or business owner looking to acquire a business, especially if you're not in you're what we call a strategic buyer. You're in the business of going and operating the business, not just buying it and just looking to get cash flow from it, and maybe package it up with others. Is the due diligence, how much due diligence you do, is a tough decision because you have to be prepared to spend dollars on something that you might just have to walk away from. And in your position, I'm guessing you felt like there's probably a small window here. You saw an opportunity. Maybe you don't really understand what maybe the value was in doing a lot of due diligence and going through everything. Maybe the opportunity wasn't there. And so you just kind of dove in the deep end. But, you know, I will say that it was great that you did have an advisor and that at least helped you think through certain things to know what you were getting into. Because without that, all it is just excitement and potential without any anything real to kind of rely on.
What was the due diligence process? Just out of curiosity and dovetailing on what Jack said. So here you are, you don't want to miss this opportunity, and you're like, well, I don't want, you know, what do I do next? Did you think about like taking more time, or were you in a rush? What was that process like?
It was hectic because, and I'm trying to recollect, you know, it's 8 years. It'll be 8 years in February that I had this practice. So at that time, I was studying for my board exams, you know, so it was like in between a class session where I'd go and I'd talk to the accountant. Because on the seller side, it was his family and their accountant. Those are the two people that I would be dealing with, you know. And his family knew nothing about healthcare at all, you know, so they were just like this about a lot of questions. Like, she's like, I don't know, you know, come look.
Yeah.
And so the accountant was kind of standoffish and like, hey, look, here's the writing, here's the charts, here's the books, you let me know. And the books weren't that well maintained. So it was like kind of like a purposeful ambiguity about certain things. And so I would find it frustrating because my advisor would say, well, get this index. What are these? And they just wouldn't know, you know? But we knew that they were doing okay, that they were making money, that the office was viable.
You didn't get a chance to go in and observe the practice and do the kind of deep.
Yeah.
It's hard because every week his referring doctors would kind of start referring elsewhere. You know what I mean? So you're losing time, and there were other buyers interested as well. You know, it wasn't just me. There were other larger, the big groups, the multi-practice groups. They were circling around. It was really like sharks circling. You know?
Yeah.
And they were coming in, and they would go in, and I would hear, like, the seller's not going to tell you what those buyers thought, but I was like, well, how come they're not putting in offers, you know, or how come they're not countering me, you know? And in hindsight, maybe now I know why, you know? So in my head, I was like, okay, either do this or not, or I stay with where I am now and I'm not really happy. This partnership's not working out. I don't want to work for the corporate anymore. Should I start from zero or should I start from like, 20% there at least, right? The equipment's there. There's patients on the schedule. I can go in and do this versus starting from brand new.
Right.
And so I just flipped the mental coin and I took it, and it worked out.
Yes.
But
well, what they say is most people that are successful, you have to be either a little bit of crazy and a lot of guts, or a lot crazy, but you still need the guts, right? At some point, you got to make that leap of faith.
Yeah.
So obviously, when you're buying a practice, you're basically saying, here's the money to make up for the time that it's going to take me to build this up, right?
Kind of. I mean, it was more like, what's your practice worth? And that's kind of a funny thing, like valuing.
Yeah. How'd you go about that? Tell us about that.
Because, okay, a practice makes money by a doctor, in this case, a single doctor, doing procedures, right? And so however many procedures he or she did that year, minus the cost it took to run the office equals, net revenue. And then there's different formulas for how you want to value that based on the area or whatever you could. So their initial offer was like that, but I was like, but there's a certain transitional program that you go through. Like the buyer would introduce me to their clients, right? The seller, right? Okay. He would say, hey, this is Laith Mahmood. I want you to meet my number 5 and 6 and 7 referrals, and we're going to go out to dinner with my number 1, 2, and 3, and 4 referrals, right. And we're really going to vouch for you, and they're going to trust that you're going to do good care. There was none of that.
Right.
There was none of that. It was just
a lot riskier.
It was just a scandalous thing that happened. Oh my God, he passed away. This is crazy. Who are you? What's your name? Like where are you from?
Yeah.
Literally, one of them asked, what church do you go to, son? And so it was just a very, and so because of that formula doesn't work.
Right.
It doesn't work. I could have 0. So it was just kind of like your imagination and what you and a seller are willing to agree with. And it was his family, and they really would have probably accepted any number.
How much of the ultimate valuation that you came up with, is it your gut and just your intelligence and life experiences versus relying on what advisors or formulas were saying?
It was really the advisor. Because at that point I had, a family, and I was like, I can go and get risky and do this. If I was on my own, I would, but I got these people that rely on me. I can't. So I really relied on the advisor. I was like, what do you think we should offer?
Yeah.
And so he's like, put this number out. And I was like, okay.
And it worked.
So yeah, and it worked, but I probably should have gone.
Well,
but anyway,
hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah, so is.
So okay, so now you come in.
Yeah.
You got the business. Congratulations, you're a business owner, and all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I thought I was in the healthcare business, but now I'm running a business.
Yeah.
What was that like on the first time you realized there's a business end of being in medicine?
It was very stressful. I mean, because it just goes antithetical to how you think as a doctor. Healthcare, surgery, whatever you want to call it, is very logical. It's like, okay, here's the pathology, here's the disease process. This is how you approach it. This is how you design the flap. This is how you take out the tooth. This is how you build bone. You know what I mean? And you do that, and nature hopefully will be on your side, and it works. But in business, every little thing, there's probably like 15 different ways you can do it, and it just depends on your either experience or your gut or who advised you. There was no formal training. There wasn't a book I can open and says, all right, step 1, do this. It was just like, all right, this employee tells you that she was getting paid this much. She's not telling you the truth. There's no way. What do you do? Because she knows how to run this part of your practice, and to get somebody else will take you months to train. Yeah. You're kind of at her mercy. Bite the bullet, pay her. When I took over the practice, there were 3 employees. Like the previous doctor had ran it with 3. I have 7 now. So I realized that's how I run a single surgeon office. I need a lot of help. I do it that way versus how that person did it. Now, it took me years to get there. I started at 3, then I hired another, and then I hired another at 5, and I was doing well, And that's when I realized too that every business reflects the leadership.
Yes.
And I was like, okay, well, what kind of person am I? Because what kind of practice is this going to be? What kind of person will work in this area? Who am I like marketing to? Because I may be this kind of person, but I might not work in Memorial,
Right.
I may work somewhere else, So I have to kind of go out and figure out who should this be? What kind of practice should this be? And tried different things, finally figured out this is what I want it to be. And I was like, okay, this is what I want it to look like, what kind of culture does that reflect? So I have to kind of build a culture. And I really like, my analogy is like you're building a fire. You know, you put in these small embers in and you build it and you get this initial spark and it's flaming on its own. And you slowly add wood. If you add too much wood, it'll blow it out.
Right.
And so by when you do it right, it'll burn on its own.
Yeah.
And so you just throw pieces of wood in there, it'll keep burning. So I have to create this little culture of a core group of people that I can trust. And I got them. I got 2 or 3 people that I can trust, that I groomed. And then they started to kind of do their own training. And I would just find the right people and I put them in there. And then they would infect each other with the right culture. And then I could just step back. It took me years to get there.
So you went from working 5 hours a day before. Now you own this practice. You're probably working 7 days a week.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not just 8 hours because you got to deal with all these additional things. In the meantime, you got little kids at home.
Yeah.
You got a wife.
Yeah.
And if you're not careful, you're not healthy yourself because you're just running around. How did you balance that? Make sure that you're taking care of yourself. As most entrepreneurs, when they take on the world, they forget about themselves. What was that like for you?
It was I'm still trying. I don't think you'll ever get there. I'm better at it than I used to be. I think part of it is just growing up a little bit.
It's all the white hair.
Yeah. It's funny. You were looking at an old picture just yesterday, of when my wife was pregnant with our son, and I had zero white hair.
Yeah.
Zero. Now I'm only white hair.
A little salt and pepper.
Yeah, and I was just salty. So it was one of the most difficult things I had to do because I had to take off the hat when I walked into the door. I had to be at work. I was the boss. I was a surgeon. It was yes, sir. Of course, sir. Yes, right away, sir. You know what I mean? Like, and then we come home, your kids don't even recognize you when you walk in. They're just doing whatever. They don't listen to you. You know what I mean? So I have to be like, okay, it's fine. I'm not at work. I'm at home. I have to be patient. Yeah. It's okay if they don't listen to you. You got to talk to them the right way. You can't get mad. You know what I mean? So to this day, I still struggle with it, but it was transition.
And along those lines, obviously, everybody's got the same 24 hours in the day. It's all about what you prioritize, right? And between work and family, oftentimes friends are secondary, and that's perfectly okay. What was that like when you were not as available? Did that create any issues for you on a personal level? A lot of these entrepreneurs, again, they just work 24 hours a day, and sometimes people think, oh, they don't have time for me. They're too good for me. Yeah. Did you have any issues like that where you were just pulled away so much that you had to kind of make your circle smaller?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the people who I spoke to, people who I interacted with Monday through Friday were my staff and my patients and the referring doctors. I mean, I would try to text and call my wife a little bit throughout the day here and there. But that's your second family,
right?
And so when you come home, you're tired, and you try to be present for your wife and kids, and so you don't really have time to call and chat with your buddy or do something social because you're only there an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then you got to put them to bed. Yeah, and then I got to do work when they're in bed. I got to sit down and go back to the office remotely, and do charting. And I never left the office. I would be at the office from 7 to 5:30. I'd come home for 2 hours, and then I'm back at the office remotely until I fall asleep. Yeah. So it was just 6, 7, 8 years now, and I've come to realize that that's not healthy.
Yeah,
that's not good.
Good. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back, what are some things that you've learned that you would want others who are maybe just thinking of, they're about to graduate?
Yeah.
Like what is some advice you would give the Laith of 8 years ago?
I would say don't be afraid to get rid of people that aren't good, that you don't think will work out. Don't let them intimidate you by how important they make themselves seem to you, because that's their way. Obviously, that's a natural thing for them to do, is to act important and relevant, and then to use that card to gain. And that's human nature, But I think a new business owner, a new boss will always be afraid of that. Don't be afraid to fire people, because you'll always look back and think to yourself, I should have done it sooner. And that happened to me every single time. I was like, why did I waste my time? I could have spent this much time hiring this new person. That's one big thing.
You mentioned earlier that California was maybe 10 years ahead of Houston, and things are rapidly changing now. Jack, you might not know this, but besides being a dentist, being a surgeon, an MD, you also do your own anesthesia, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think we were talking before this how things are changing there as well. What are some of the changes that are happening in your space that you've seen over the last 10 years that are kind of transformational, or things that a lot of these kids coming out of school now might not even realize?
Well, I mean, in terms of the technical aspect of what we're doing and the laws that are changing, the regulations, oral surgeons, again, our feet are in dentistry and medicine. And the concept of what we do has a lot to do with anesthesia. We do anesthesia training in our residency. And I think we're one of the only few specialties in healthcare that does the level of anesthesia. Like when you go get a colonoscopy, you're asleep, and the GI surgeon is doing the colonoscopy. The GI surgeon is not doing your anesthesia. You know what I mean? They're not making sure you're asleep. There's a separate doctor or CRNA or team managing your anesthesia. Okay, that's different for us. I'm doing your anesthesia and I'm doing your surgery at the same time. Okay, and it's been like that since the birth of our specialty in the 40s. A model that's worked, a proven safety record, all the things that we say to tell everybody that it's okay. We can do this because we've developed it and we've done it safely. Now, in dentistry, zooming back even further, dentists discovered anesthesia. Like the concept of being numb and having surgery done on you, that was a dentist.
Wow.
The concept of being asleep, nitrous, ether, that was a dentist. The very first anesthetic procedure was a tooth being extracted in that hall in Harvard, and the guy gave the lady ether. And everybody laughed because as he was taking out her tooth, she started screaming. So they thought it wasn't working. Well, she was just in delirium. She had no idea what was going on. And after the procedure, she was like, "Oh, you're already finished? I didn't even know you're doing that." You know what I mean? So anesthesia came out of dentistry, but it's like anything. People jump on and they want to claim ownership. And so the anesthesiology broke off into its own thing, but remnants of that are still in dentistry. Like when you go to the dentist gets you numb. You know what I mean? The dentist gets you numb. So oral surgeons were special in that we would do deep levels of anesthesia. Now, people want a slice of that pie. The economics of what we do, if you carve out a slice, if you carve out a pie of revenue in oral surgery, about 35% is anesthesia. It's a lot of money, So maybe that's just my take on it, but I feel like people wanted some of that, and also the other dentists that would try anesthesia, the pediatric dentists and the other specialties, or even general dentists, we're starting to have complications. You hear about these stories in the news of a kid dying in the dental office because he was asleep or she was asleep, and then they had a complication. So laws start to catch up with this. They're okay, maybe dentists shouldn't do anesthesia. Well, what are oral surgeons? Are they dentists? Are they doctors? Like, what are they doing? So we're kind of left out of that conversation, and they're focusing more on dentists and so dentists got regulated where they can't do certain levels, but oral surgeons were always kept out of it. Recently, the eyes shifted on oral surgeons. And they're like, what are you guys doing? You guys doing a lot of anesthesia. Is this safe? Like, what is this? And recently, the anesthesiologists, the dentists that wanted to do anesthesia only branched out and created their own field. Now there is a specialty called dental anesthesiology. It was never there. When I was in residency, it was never there. When I was in dental school, it was not there really. So now they're saying, okay, we're the only ones to be doing anesthesia. Oral surgeons, you guys just do oral surgery. Let us do the anesthesia. And if that happens, it's going to be a huge shift, because then I have to employ a dentist anesthesiologist or a CRNA or an anesthesiologist. So out of that slice of pie, 30% is just gone now,
Right.
And so there's active back and forth. And it's nationwide. Every state has their own progress on where this is going. Some the needle is going towards the anesthesiologist and they're going to lose, and oral surgeons are only going to be doing surgery. And some oral surgeons are still strong. In Texas, we're still okay-ish, but it's not for sure.
Let me ask you about the downward pressure on revenues and price of just what people in medicine are getting paid these days. So I was having a conversation with some doctors out in California, and they were talking about Medicare reducing reimbursements by 4%, and everything is benchmarked off of that. Does the same thing apply in the dentistry field?
Not as much. Medicare, they dictate more than medical procedures. Now, we do procedures that are billed under medicine.
Right.
So there are some procedures, because when we do a procedure, you either bill it to medical insurance or dental insurance, and it gets really complicated. Depends on what kind of procedure, what kind of insurance. And so when we built medical insurance, usually they pay way less than dental insurance. So that's, you see that right away. Is that when we bill for medical, we kind of like, oh, okay, let's bill the medical. You're not going to get much redoing a service for the patient. Whereas you bill for dental, you get pretty good reimbursement, you know? So I think that's one thing, is that Medicare is making our medical cases get paid less. And so we're now taking less and less medical insurance.
So overall, the pie is headed towards shrinking, and reimbursements from the medicine side's coming down. So these are things that an aspiring business owner going into medicine needs to look at, just the reality, right? So I want to go back to talking about these companies coming in, the big groups buying you out. So we want to tie it back here. So now you've established this practice, you've worked out the kinks, and now the next phase now is, okay, well, what's my exit strategy? And so you've seen these groups coming in, and it's these big PE firms or multi-groups. What's the environment now? Who's buying these practices, and what's happening to the solo practitioner?
Well, the solo practitioner, they call it the cottage practice. That's like the term they use. Like, oh, you have a cottage practice, meaning you're in this little cottage in the forest and you're doing your surgery all by yourself, you know? And depending on who you ask, they're saying the cottage model is dated. The cottage model is going to be obsolete pretty soon. You got to join up, or else you're going to be out, competed, and you're going to suffer, you know? So that's what's happening, is that these firms come in and they'll coax these surgeons. Usually older surgeons will get on board first.
Right.
And then they become their spokesperson. You know, they're the face on the brochure now. Oh, so-and-so out of Dallas is now our lead surgeon consultant, you know? And so they go around and they tell these younger doctors, hey, look, doc, this is the way it is. You got to join up, or else you're not going to do well. Think about your family. There's a lot of like intimidation. And that's what makes me really stand off. I'm like, you're saying all these words and you're saying these scary things. Just tell me the truth. Like, what are the numbers? Where are things heading? Don't give me these colorful things. That's what makes me kind of stand off. It's like, why are they making it scary? You know? But it is happening. You know, right. You have groups that are smaller, groups that are medium, and then giant groups. The giant groups are the ones that come from the coasts, you know, the East Coast and West Coast groups. And so for me, I've been approached since 6 years ago. I was first approached. You know, you get a letter in the mail. Are you thinking about selling? You should sell to us. We will value it differently, and you'll still have ownership in your practice, doc. We're not going to make you an employee, all this and that. I had some friends that sold, and they're happy, but I feel like if they weren't, would they really tell me? Because they want me to join. Because if you allow more people to join, your value goes up too. So when you become part of this entity, you're incentivized to gain more people into your entity, because when you get clumped up into this beast, the beast gets bigger and you become bigger with it. And so you want everybody to come on, you know what I mean? So you're always going to speak well of it. And so that makes me like wonder, like, what is the truth? Everybody's biased. You know, I want to know what the real truth is. And you can't get it seems like.
Yeah. So if we look here in Houston area, what would you say is the percentage of solo practitioner cottage surgery versus these conglomerates?
That's a good question. I mean, a lot of times you won't know. You know, like you call a oral surgeon's office, they're not going to tell you, you know, so it's just based off of friends and the talk in the community. Yeah. If I were to guess, I'd say that the private offices that are out there right now, maybe 30% have sold.
They've already sold.
Yeah. 20 to 30%.
Yeah.
And they're the older doctors.
In looking at just your peers, what would you say accelerates their motivation to sell? Is it they're just tired, they've been doing this too long, they want to do something else? Or is it the pressure of the day-to-day running of the practice, the, slicing of the pie? What would you say are the driving factors that they're like, you know what, why not? Let's leave.
Well, I have colleagues that have sold, and we always talk about it, and to me, the person that first comes to mind, he's a successful surgeon. He's in California. And he sold, and I think he wanted to gain a large amount of money quickly and then use that to invest and then kind of stand back and let the business side be handled by other people. He was okay with that. Me, and he had a partner, and his partner was all on board, so it was two of them. Me, I'm by myself. My partner is just how I think at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So it's harder for me to kind of go back and forth. I think if I had a partner and he or she was really gung ho about it either way, that'll make it easier for me. But me, I'm just hesitant because it's like I did all this work to build this, and I'm going to hand the reins to somebody. You know, I just don't feel comfortable with that. So he did it that way. My other friend of mine in Texas who sold, I think he wanted to grow his new practice, and he felt like it would aid him in growth because they offer you marketing assistance, they offer you assistance, however it may be, to gain employees and stuff like that, and to gain better referrals. So I think that was his angle, and he's kind of a little bit more, 50-50 on it. Like when I speak to him, he's not like it's not all rainbows and fairy tales. There are some things that I don't like. But in the end, he's like, yeah, it's pretty good, Whereas my friend in California is like, oh my God, it's amazing. Join, So that's why I'm like, and so, and I have a brother-in-law, who did that as well. And he's happy. He's very happy, but he's older than me. He's like 15 years ahead of me. Yeah. So it just depends.
Okay.
Yeah. When I represent, I do a lot of sell side. There is this internal struggle you see with this owner selling their business about what it's going to mean for them on the other side, and the buyers always has kind of the sweet talking, we're going to take care of you, don't worry, and sometimes it comes off like all of a sudden, like, I don't believe them a penny, or sometimes it's really believable, or that's what they want to believe. And then, here I am as their lawyer being like, well, here's some sobering news about how this could all go wrong. And some take it well. Some are just like, don't talk to me about that. Or it just scares the hell out of them.
I think,
and so then they're like, well, I trusted this buyer rep about these things, and now you're telling me this, who do I believe? And the answer is it's kind of all of it.
Yeah.
Because there are going to be some things where like when you close and you get that payment, it's being like, wow, look at all that money in my account. This is great.
Yeah.
And then, but if you're still working at the place and you got to deal with their HR person, or you got to ask them to go do something because before you could just go freaking do it, and I've seen that where a lot of sellers of businesses, they're so used to being their own boss.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm not the boss anymore. Like, this sucks.
Well, we've talked about this, people crying on closing day because they realize, oh, wait, this is real. What do I do tomorrow? It's funny because I was talking over the weekend with a client of mine in California, and I said, do you know what you want to do the day after you sell? He's like, no. I'm like, can't do it. You're going to be depressed. You're going to be depressed. Yeah. You got to think that through. I want to put you on the spot here for those folks that listen to our show that are service providers. Go thinking back to the last 8 years, everybody that's hit you up for something, trying to sell you guys something, whether it's credit card processing machines or something. What were some of the good things, like some things that were positive that service providers did, and what were things that you absolutely hated that made you say, I'll never do business with people like this? Anything that stand out?
Being available. You know what I mean? Like picking up the phone or emailing me back the same day, because when I was graduating, one of my attendings, Jim Wilson, told me the 3 A's of success. And like, Laith, these are the 3 A's of success. And they're in order of importance, the first being the least, right? So the least important is ability, okay? Second is affability, but the most important is availability. Just be available. And that was just to oral surgeon. I think it applies to anything, So when these salespeople come up to me, they're calling me every day, or there's an email in my inbox every day. And as soon as I move forward, they don't get back to me. They don't call. They respond to me late. If I have a question about something, they drag their feet. Their demeanor is different. You know what I mean? So I'm like, if your enthusiasm, if you're really faking it to sell it, and then you totally turn different after you've sold it, that really speaks poorly, And so I'm not going to want to go any further with you. You know what I mean? So that's my thing, is be available. Like if there are questions, you should be more available after the sale than before the sale, because there's more questions after. There's always more questions after. Okay, now how do I do this? What does this mean? I don't remember this, because no one reads the contracts that deeply, And I think if you can do that, you're going to get more sales. You're going to get more referrals. That's my biggest thing, is be available after the sale.
It's a great piece of advice on that.
Mhm.
You guys have anything else you want to share?
Well, the one question I've been thinking, like, what's the one problem that if you had a magic wand with your business, if you could just wave it, it would solve it? Is there one thing that's like, man, I wish I could really just fix this?
Well, I wish I can be at the office with the office closed for like a week, you know, and just do all the things I need to do.
Yeah.
Because it's all half. It's like, okay, here's my to-do list today, and I got to do piecemeal whatever I can in between patients and surgeries, you know. And then before it's 5:30, if I don't get on the road right now, I'm gonna be home. Now I can't make dinner. You know what I mean? So it's like, I wish I can split me up into 3 pieces and just handle it more. And that's the best way I can put it. There's just so much to do.
Information contained in this podcast and accompanying video have been derived from sources believed to be reliable. This content is not guaranteed as to its accuracy and does not purport to be a complete analysis of the topics discussed. Analysis is based on assumptions that may not come to pass. None of the content should be construed as legal or investment advice. You should consult with a qualified professional before implementing any strategies discussed. All expressions of opinion reflect the judgment of the speakers on the date the video was recorded and are subject to change.